Hi, this is Xfixium, and welcome to the How to Make a Master System Game Using Devkit SMS tutorial series number 17. In this tutorial, we go over the title screen source code. We set up various constants that will hold our tilemap data. We once again go over using the game substate to control the flow of the game. And lastly, we create code for the game's option menu. Congrats! You've made it to the finish line. This is the last tutorial in this series. Let's get into it one last time. Okay, so we're going to do the title screen logic at this point. We're going to first go into the game source and we're going to uncomment this line out. And we're going to remove this reset player variables. And then for the game mode, I don't think I need to have the set here, but we'll just do it or leave it as it was before. Game mode, and we're going to make it one player again. I'm going to save all that, and we're going to go back into our stage. There was a mistake made there. As you may have seen in the last video, the score wasn't being updated properly when scrolling up to the top of the page, and now the reason behind that is the update stage scroll overwrote the update HUD top here. So all we're going to do here is take our update HUD top and then we're going to put it after our update stage scrolling. So I paste that in there, and that should fix our little issue so that it doesn't overwrite the row on refresh. So it should now update correctly, so you won't see those zeros for brevity before we get to the very top of it. So those are changes, and now we're going to go into the actual title source, and what we're going to do is grab some constants, some static data, as we have done with some other stuff. We're also going to define some other things here. So at the top, we're going to create a signed car variable here. This is not a read only, so this isn't a constant. It is a variable that we're going to use when we get to the options screen. So when we're in the options screen, the user is going to be able to press up and down on the controller to choose an option that they want to change, and there'll be some options available. So again, we went over that way back when. So here it's we're going to allow the user to pick whatever game mode, if they're going to use the speed boost or the pack boost, what stage to start on, and then how many players. So the minimum amount is 3 and the maximum amount is 5. So they'll be able to make that choice then at that point. So here, that's what that will do. We'll keep track of our index. So there'll be a Miss Pac-Man sprite here, and the value at that point will be 0. So it'll be 0, and then as the player presses down, I'll move from 0 to 1 to 2, and then 3 as the maximum place, and then it can move back up. So it'll be from 3 to 2, and then 1 and 0. So this will hold which option that they're currently at when they press up and down. So that's what this variable is about. And then we're also going to give coordinates for those, for the Y positioning. The X positioning of the sprite won't change, it will be static, but when they press up and down, it will change the vertical coordinate. So here we're going to hold those static values here in a constant. So that's all it's going to do. Oh, and you'll see that later. And then we're going to put a whole bunch of static information in here again. That will be constants, so it's going to be quite a few, but I'll go over each one of these. So title pal, that's going to be, if we go to the title screen here, title main, I have some prefab stuff here. So where it says pal, normally it would say NTSC as the default, but we're going to, when it's PAL, we're going to change it over to PAL, and we're going to select one more than what PAL says, so we can overwrite the NTSC. NTSC is 4 letters here. PAL is only 3, so we're going to grab an extra empty one. So again, we go in there, select our IDs, and then we export as decimal. And as you can see, when I put it in here, it should match up. So 402, 395, 313, and then 279 is our empty tile. And again, we can relook at that here. If we go here and we show tiles, we can see that we start at 279 here. Because it's going to be a little different, we're not going to put this tile set immediately at 256. Instead, we're going to put a partial tile set from the stage main, so we put those existing numbers in first before we decide to put in our tile set, which would be this. So, and when we explain that, when we put the resources again together, why that's going to be the case, and why we're going to reuse that information. So then title width, again, this all is just text that I've prefabbed here. So when we look at the title main again, we can see that I have some stuff put together. So width is here, so I'll copy that because that text is going to be used. They meet, that stuff will be used in the cutscenes, and chase, that'll be used in the cutscenes, but Miss Pac-Man will be part of that. So that's all we're doing, is we're going to get all our text, title, Blinky, Pinky, Inky, Sue, when they're being introduced in the beginning of the game. Title starring Miss Pac-Man, and then we're going to have, some other additional text when we're putting it together. So all this is getting all text. So these ones are for the mode, the game mode. So 1-player or 2-player or team mode. This is text for the live. So or I believe, I forget what this one is. That's for live somewhere. We'll figure it out then. And then when we want to make the title, when we want to clear something out, we have this empty one. We also have one that's a little bigger. As you can see, it's just 279, which is the empty tile. And then the Miss Pac-Man one that I just showed, where it shows this Miss Pac-Man in yellow. So that's what that is. And yes and no, that's when we want to, when the options, whether we're going to use a pack boost or not. So there's a yes or no for that. And then I think lives is just the Miss Pac-Man icon. So lives is 4 tiles, so that's probably just Miss Pac-Man. If I look at it here, show ID, so we have what is that, 220, let me take a look. It looks like it's 227, 228, so if we take a look at that, yeah, lives, 227, 228, 229, and 230, so, and that's what we have together, or 330, yeah, 329, 330, right, yes, so that's what this is. So it's just a Miss Pac-Man icon for that, so depending on how many lives I pick. The title additional Miss Pac-Man comes from the very bottom here, so if I go to additional Miss Pac-Man, this whole line here, so when I selected it, I had to select also the icon. So this whole chunk here, I did the same thing. I copied, exported tile IDs, and made it a decimal array. And that's what I put here. And then the title options is the portion that is here, this whole section here. I just wound up doing the same thing that I did with everything else and popping it in here, because we're going to use the title screen and then replace a portion of it with this option screen. And then at the very end here, this is a little newer. This is a 2-dimensional array. So an array holds 1 dimension usually of information, but here what we want to do is, this is for the numbers that are going to show up for the stage select. So I put, since it doesn't go any higher than 25, I have 25 elements in here, as you can, and I denote that here. So 25 elements. that have pairs, so or 2 elements as a pair. So these are the pair, and as you can see, I bracketed them like this to show that they're a pair. And there's going to be 25 of those pairs in here, and what these pairs represent are numbers. So here we have, this is number 1, and then this is the blank tile, because we want to have the maximum is 2 digits because we're going up to 25, but we want to wipe out the second digit when it's just one digit here. So this is 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, then 10, and then from there, I believe that's 10 at least. Maybe I'm not right on that. 3, 5, 7. Nope, that is 10. So yeah, 3, 5, 8 is 1. So, and this would be 0. So I'm going up to 10 here, and then here is going up to 20, and then finally the last 5 here is the 20, or the last 5 elements. So that's what we're doing here. We're going to use this later, and you'll see how it works out. So there's probably easier ways to draw this text onto the screen, but this is how I chose to do it. It's just basically tile IDs here to represent a number. So we'll see that played out in a little bit. Do have some more static data here, but this is all related to the marquee. So in the beginning tile screen, there's this marquee where there's a light that goes around this border, and it goes constantly around over and over again. There are 5 points, or 6 points, sorry. There's 6 points in that marquee that are spinning. So there's a light, and there's 6 of them, and they're 8 tiles apart. So it starts at 0 for the first one, and then 8 tiles for the next. 16, 24, 32, and 40. And then what we do is, this marquee is actually the tile indexes on where these lights will follow. So here I'm going in backwards pattern. If we go to that graphic, I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. So here is the, let me turn off the area grid. Here is that marquee here, this red dotted section. So what we want to do is, again, we're going to have 6 of these running lights that follow around this marquee, and they're going to go counterclockwise. So they're going to go this way, and there's going to be, again, 6 of them spaced apart that will go around and around and around. So what we want to do is, we want to figure out exactly where those coordinates will be for those marquee entries. And what we can do is, and actually this is not the good one, we want the tile screen, sorry. So we're going to be on the actual title, because those coordinates would actually make sense then at that point. So we're going to go in, and we're going to figure out what our indexes are to, so here it starts at 216, and we're going to want to go this way. So what I did here is I selected the ones from 2, 6, I was supposed to be 216, sorry. Or actually, I should probably start from the other area. Anyway, from 216 to 201. So I wanted to go this way, and this is what this array will be, this marquee array. It's going to tell these lights which way to go. So we're going to have an index that runs through this, and we could do it backwards as well if we wanted to, but here what I did was I just went in here, and then I selected the index, and I exported decimal but in reverse. So whatever my selection is here, instead of from left to right, now we're going to get it from right to left, and I copied that, and then I put it in here. So this is the first top part of that marquee, and then here is the left side of that marquee. So if we look at those numbers, we can see that 200, 232, 264 on down to 424. So that's all I did was select that, and then I select across to get these other ones. So as you can see, it goes from 425 to 440 over here. So if we look at that, it goes from 425 to 440, and then finally we want to go from 441 here and then go up to 217. So, and that was another one where, since it goes left from top to down, that we just get it in reverse order. So that's how I would do it. I select it and then it got in reverse order to put it in here. So, and let's see if that actually works still. Reverse. So if I did it like that and then I punch it in here for a test, yes, it still works. So we got the reverse order of that from the selection. So, and this is basically the path that each one of these lights will follow. And each one of these lights on top of it all, so they have an animation for each one of them. So if I turn this off first, these are strategically placed in a way, the tiles are, that it will animate it going from right to left. So here, if we look at this one, this tile here, it starts with the light to the right. So there's two dots here. It starts with the right light as the light, and then the second frame of animation, the light has moved to the left, to the left one, and then finally it shows the empty light there. So it will have an animation where this dot goes here for our top one, and then I think this is our left one. As you can see, the dot goes down and then it disappears, and then the one at the bottom, it goes to the right and then disappears, and then finally the one border that goes to the right, it starts from the bottom, goes up, and then disappears. So we're going to go through each one of these indexes, and we're going to animate each one of those. When it lands on a new index, it's going to animate those 3 frames. So giving the illusion that this light's tracing along the border. And there's going to be, like I said, 6 of these lights that trace along this border. Our next function here, our first function, reality, is our set pal. So all this does is, if we don't, so if n defined, so if not defined, so if the NTSC timing has not been defined, then we're going to put that title pal over top of what would normally be the NTSC in this tile map, and we're going to put the pal in there instead, showing that now this is the pal version of this game instead of the NTSC version. So that's what we're going to do there. Then as I said, I always have a function for the most part that is going to set the data, and then there's going to be a portion that is going to update the data every frame. And again, title's no different. So set title is that load phase, update title is that update phase when the engine's running or the game loop is running. So no different here. So this is what we're going to do is load. As you can see, there's some things called right away, and reset player variables is one of those. So the one I took out of the main, as you can see, is here. So it's going to reset those global variables right away. It's going to reset the player variables right away, and then we're going to set our mode to the sprite tall mode. We're going to use the first half of our VRAM for sprites, and then here we're going to start setting things up. So now again, I'm going to bank switch so I can set my background palette, which is the title background palette, and again we've defined that over here. So the title background palette would be this one that's being used, and we're going to set that here using Devkit SMS. So we're going to set that, and then we're going to bank switch for the main sprite palette again for our sprite palette. So here we're going to ROM bank, or we're going to switch our bank, then we're going to set it using this again. We're going to switch the bank again so we can get the sprite tiles, and then we're going to put those here like we did with the with the actual stage. When we loaded that, we loaded these sprite tiles the same way. Then we bank switch again, and then we're going to get the stage tiles, and we're going to, these are the stage tiles that have the number on, and we're just going to load the whole thing in because I don't really care. I don't need to cherry pick an entire amount, but we can here. I only need the numbers from this, so it is a little wasteful in the processing. I don't think I need to bring 736. Maybe I do. That seems awfully specific, so maybe that is something that I need to do. So I think is that like 27 tiles or something? I have to take a look here. So if I take 736 and I divide that by 32 because each tile is 32. Yeah, it's 23. Okay, so I'm going to bring in 23 tiles from this stage tiles, and if you look at that, see if we go to stage 1 and we take a look at what that might be for the stage tiles, it would bring in up to, these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So yeah, 6, 12, talking 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Okay, so it would get all these tiles up to the end of the score. And the reason why we do that is when we're in the title screen, we actually show the score at the very top. So that's why I'm bringing those in first, because the score, when it updates, it all goes off of this tile set. So we're going to put all the tiles up to the end of where it says score, because that's all we need for to show our score at the top of the title screen. So that's why we're bringing that in. And I'll bring 23 tiles in. And then after there's 23 tiles, and then we're going to actually bring in our, again, we're going to ROM our bank switch here, and we're going to bring in our title tiles. So, and you notice we brought it at 279. That's because when we take 2, 5, 6, which is where we're going to start our tiles here, and we add 23, that gives us 279. So once we add those first 23 tiles at 256 on the second half of RAM, then we're going to add our actual title tiles right after that. So that's what we're doing here. So again, bank switching, adding our title tiles here, and then we're going to bank switch again, and then we're going to load our actual tile map for the title screen. So we're going to actually load that out, it's designed for it. So essentially we're loading this screen. So that's what that tile map is. And then we're going to start setting up the player and setting the ghost. In this scenario and all the other cutscenes as well, I'm reusing the entities that we already have in place. And as you'll see later, when we update the graphics, it's going to look very similar to the stage logic. And this is very similar to the stage logic or setup. So here we're going to set up the player, but we're going to set up the player for a scene. So I'm going to have it a state that it's within the scene state. And that means we're going to still do all the updates that we normally do, but with this scene state, it's not going to do any of that other logic that we normally would have, like when the sprite is, moving and we have control of the sprite, or the entity, I should say. So we would normally have control of player 1 or Miss Pac-Man. But in this state, we're just using all the other functionality without the actual control of Miss Pac-Man here. So all we're doing is setting up the entity, the player entity, and then positioning it. Right now we're going to position it off screen at 200 because there's going to be some delays before we introduce all the characters for the game. And we want it off screen until we're ready to show that sprite. Here we're going to switch the bank again. And we're going to load the stage 1 map. Why do we do that? We do that by default. This is the first 2 lines of the stage layout. So we're just going to go in and grab our first map. So again, it's stage 1 here. And we're just going to grab this section by default. So whatever, so we're gonna have our title screen layout, but then at the very top we're gonna put this on the very top of the title screen as a default, and then when we update that, we're gonna update with whatever scores we have from that score. Remember our global score array, but this is just putting the default values at the top, and that's also putting up the one up and all and high score and all that stuff at the top as well. So it's going to put that default tile map at the top. Here we said 0, 0. It's going to be 32 tiles across and 2 tiles in height. So, and then we're going to update that, and then we're going to set PAL here. This is the one that we just did. Where if this hasn't been defined, if it has, if it hasn't. So, but if it is, then it won't do anything. So we're gonna reset our pack boost to 0. That means no, there is no pack boost. Option index, we're gonna initialize that number when we come in here. We want to reset that every time we can come in here, because again, you have to remember, if the player plays through a whole bunch of stuff and the game's over, we're gonna come back to this screen, and if I initialize it up here, it won't matter. So we have to reset it here. So we're going to reset it here. We're going to reset to all the default values that we're going to be able to change in our options. So game mode is going to be now player 1 game mode, and our previous state, again, like we do with all the other ones, we make the previous state equal to the game state. That means we're done loading, and the next time around on the game loop, and now we're going to get into the updating phase of it. So no different than what we did with the stage game state. We're doing the exact same thing here. And even though I don't plan on going through or making videos for these scenes, the source code is available on the GitHub link that's in the description down below. So you can always look at that and bring that over to your project if you want to. And then you can see how those pieces fit. But I don't feel like there's any more reason to make any more videos for these. These are already prefabricated, and again, it doesn't, the logic for that is essentially the same as it is for the title screen and for the stage. And at this point, you can look over that, and then you can try and decipher what that code does. Our next one is update title marquee. We're given a index, so that index will be one of these lights that are going around. So whatever one we're currently rendering, we're going to give it that index. So whatever that index is for whatever light, and then if there's a overarching marquee global that keeps track of what frame we're doing all the lights, because all the lights frames will match, so as they're going across each one of these tiles. So if the marquee frame equals 0, then we're going to figure out what the next marquee frame will be. So again, we're just checking if we add 1 to the marquee index. So again, this is to move the indexes around. And we're going to index or increment that index to the next tile depending on where that current index is. So the first one starts at 0, and then as we're moving along, if the marquee frame is 0, then that means we can move this along this path as it goes on. So we're going to add 1 as long as it isn't past the maximum amount that the marquee allows, and this marquee, see, has 48 elements in there. We're going to keep moving it along until it gets to the end, and then it's going to loop back to the first element, so tile index 216, and that's all we're doing here. So we're seeing if we add one to this index or to this light to move along, will it be greater than 48? If it will, then we're going to reset it back to 0. If not, we're going to add it to 1, and then we're going to set that value for that light. Again, all this is the tile index that it's fitting in here. So it starts at 0, and then when it's moving along, it'll add 1 once all the animations have played, and then moving along this path, and it's going to happen for all 6 of these marquee lights. So, and that's all we're doing here is incrementing it along. And then we're also going to figure out whatever the animation is. So we're going to get that value, and whatever that index will be, we're going to try and get our tile base off of that. So whatever the index is, we're going to find out what our tile base is. So then we're going to find out that value. So it's going to be when we go here and we go into the show tile IDs here, we're going to try and figure out what that ID is here. So for this one, it's 299. For these, it's going to be 302. That's if we, depending on how far along in the animation we are, and 305, and so on and so forth. So what's going to happen is we're going to figure out based off of that value. Here we have the 303, 306. We're going to figure out what our tile base is, because we're going to use that later. And then we're going to use that tile base, which would be, like I said, if it would be 302, then we would go and figure out based off our current frame what the frame is. So like here we're saying 297. All right. So when this is our base for the top portion of the marquee, or is it 297? Yes. So this is the base of it. So, and then depending on what frame, it will be either 0, 1, or 2, and then it'll flip back to 0 again. And depending on where the index is or where this marquee is at this point, it will offset. So it'll either be 297, it'll be 300, because that's the beginning of that one, or it'll be 303, or it will be 306. So those are the 4 choices there. And depending on where the index is at that point, we're going to check the value of that and then assign the correct beginning offset, or the base tile, where we're going to then offset again to figure out our animation frame at that point. So we're going to tile base, then we get the coordinates here. Again, this is something that we have done before, where we take the marquee value, which would be a tile index, so like 216, and now we're going to split it up so we can get the X and Y, because that's what Devkit SMS for this function requires. It requires the column and the row of where that tile lies at that point, or where this index lies. So wherever this number is, whatever one of these lights are currently on, we're going to change that tile so it's based off the base tile, and then whatever the marquee frame is. So if it's 0, then it will be just what our base tile is. But if the marquee animation is 1, then it's going to add this to 298 if this is the base. And again, if we look at that, that's based off the frame. So it starts here at our base at 297, since we're at the top of the marquee. And then if the frame is offset by 1, if it's 0, it just stays there. But if it's 1, then it goes to 298. If it's 2, when we add it on here, then it'll be at 299. And that's how this is going to work. And then this marquee gets reset in another function. So that's how that works. So each one of those things that we're going to hand in, it's going to go along and it's going to update the frame of animation. It's also going to update the position in the marquee that this light, or the light that we handed, is at that point in time. So Hopefully it made sense. So here we have update title entities. This is very much like the stage, the run engine. This is basically running the engine in a way, as you remember from the stage, the run or run game or whatever it is, we called unsafe copy SAT. Then we initiated the sprites, very similar. Here we're going to update the player tiles just like we did with the stage. As you can go back here and see, we did all that unsafe stage update player again because we're using the already pre-built stuff that's in the game here as well. So we're going to still update the player. We're going to still update the sprites and everything. So the player tiles are going to update the player. And then here we're going to do a check. If the substate that we're going to be using later in another function coming up, if it is greater or equal to 11, then we don't need to do the rest of this processing. This processing is for the title screen when the ghosts first introduce themselves, and when we make all those changes where we're introducing the ghosts, and then we're still, we're doing the marquee with the lights going around. But when the substate is greater than or equal to 11, that means that the player had pressed the button and now we're on the option screen. So since we're on the option screen, we don't have to do any more of this processing. So we're going to kick ourselves out of this routine when we're on the option screen. But if it's not on the option screen, we're going to update the ghosts like we do normal. So all the ghosts, that generally means that we're drawing them at least, and then we're going to manipulate their positions later. And then here, that method I just talked about here, we're going to hand the logic to update the title marquee for each one of those lights that we have, and we have 6 of them, as I said, and they were offset by 8 tiles a pop. So each one of these gets updated on the screen so it can move around the marquee. And then we're going to increment the marquee frame, so that means that frames the animation that all these will follow. And then here we do that check. So if it's greater than 2, so it could be 0, 1, or 2, so 3 frames of animation. If it's greater than 2, we're going to reset the marquee frame back to 0, so that it gives that effect that the light is moving sequentially across the marquee. So, and that's all we're doing here. Move title character. This is when, in the beginning, when we're moving the ghosts into position or whatever given character. So we're going to give the index that will be one of these indexes here. We're going to give it that index. And then we're going to have it that we're going to give it 2 coordinates, and these will be our threshold. So this will be the maximum amount of the horizontal value that we want, and this will be the vertical threshold. So here, if the entity that we're giving it, which would be a ghost, because in the beginning the ghosts move from left to right, and once they get past a certain part, or once they meet a certain coordinate, then they go up and then they stop. So that's basically what we're going to mimic here. So here we're going to look at entity, the entity's horizontal value, and as long as it doesn't meet the threshold that we've given it, we're going to continue moving the ghost or whatever entities here to the left. So, and remember, subtracting moves things to the left. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to horizontally move the entity to the left if it hasn't met that threshold. If it has met that threshold, the next thing we're going to check is if it's equal to that threshold. If it is, then we're going to check if it has met the vertical threshold. That means that it's met the threshold all the way to the left. Now we're going to start moving it up, and we're going to move it up to a certain point, whatever that threshold is. So here we're going to turn the entity direction that it goes up at this point, and it will now move, or so its eyeballs look up. It's going to then move up. As you recall, if we subtract the number vertically, it goes up. So then it'll keep on going up, and then once that's threshold is met, both these thresholds are met. So they met their X position and they've met their Y position. If both of those are met, then we're going to bounce to the next substate, which most likely means now. So like in this instance, Blinky moves across and he goes up. Once he reaches those thresholds, now we're going to kick the next substate so that Pinky can now move across, and then that same thing will get a different kind of threshold. And once that threshold or those thresholds are met, then we're going to move Inky in, and then Sue, and then eventually Miss Pac-Man. So that's what we're doing. Again, we're using the substate to control the flow of our logic at this point. Update title game mode. So all this does is we're going to use Devkit SMS to update the graphics on the screen depending on what game mode has been chosen by the player. So the player can press up and down, and depending on where they are in the option screen, they can press left and right at that point, and then that will increment whatever variable that we want to change. So if it's looking to change the game mode and we're at index 0 where the game mode can be changed. So if the player is here in the selection and its cursor, which would be Miss Pac-Man sprite, if they press left and right, it will increment and de-increment the game mode, and depending on what game mode it's set to, we will put a new graphic in there to show that update. So when they press left, when press right, it'll be from player 1 will be go to player 2, and then the next option would be team mode, and then if it press left, then it de-increments back to the 2-player mode and then 1-player mode. So whatever is happening to show, whatever game mode is at that point, we're gonna condition, okay, is it player 1 mode, is it player 2 mode, or is it team play? And then we're going to update section of the screen to show that new text based off of what the user or the player selected. So this does essentially the same thing as this does, except instead of changing text, now we're just going to show the lives, and we're going to use a for loop to very similar to how we did the HUD. We know that there's only a maximum of 5, so we're going to check the default lives. If this I is less than the default lives, then we know we can put a graphic in there, which is that title live, so Miss Pac-Man life. If it happens to be that I is not less than default lives, then those tiles, those 5 areas will be an empty tile, and they'll be able to move it left and right to change whatever the default lives value is, and then this will update accordingly. Again, we're using Devkit SMS the same kind of way, where we're going to change a part of the screen to update it with the lives that are selected. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Then to our final function. This is pretty short because it is only a title screen. But again, it's our update function. So there's quite a bit of things here going on. So here we're going to always call this. We're always going to update the entity. So this is like our run game again. So we're always going to call this. And as I said, when we're in the substate here, we'll kick out when we don't need to do the title screen stuff anymore. But here we go. We're going to we're going to do our logic here. So here we're going to update our entities all the time. And before we get to our substate switch, we're also going to check if the substate is less than 11. If it is, and the player pressed the button number 1, then we're going to play that confirmation sound or a confirmation sound, which it's like a little chomp sound. And then we're going to go right into the options menu at that point, because they don't have to watch the entirety of all the ghosts coming in and being introduced. They don't need to do that. They can just hit a button. They can get right to the option screen. So we want them to be able to break this substate at any point in time and go right to the options menu. And by making the substate 11, and we can go down here, load option screen. So once we go to 11, that will load the option screen. we're going to increment the substate, and then this will be the loop to check and see what options that they chose. So that's what we'll do. So we'll break out of any sort of logic down here. I won't care about that as long as we're not already on the options screen at that point. So, and there's this would be the flow. So here we're going to increment the timer. We're going to wait 60 frames to actually introduce Blinky. So we're going to, again, we're going to wait until those 60 frames have been up. And then when it has met that threshold, we're going to update the marquee area to where it says with Blinky. So that's what these two calls are doing. So we're going to set the tilemap with those changes. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set from Blinky starts at y coordinate of 200, and that's outside of the view of this screen. So as I said before, 192 pixels is the height of the Sega Master System resolution. So if we put something that's at 200, it's not on the screen technically. So here we're going to put it where it needs to be in the vertical value so it can start moving to the left. And then what we're going to do, since we set up Blinky, and then we're going to actually go to the next substate. And as you can see here, we're just going to move the title character in, and we're looking for that threshold. So it has to move from the left all the way to the 56th pixel. And then once it hits that, then it's going to move up to the 52, that pixel coordinate. So once it meets these two pixel coordinates based off of this, as we have over here, once it beats those, then it automatically goes to the next substate. So once it's met this threshold, now we're going to start loading in Pinky's data. So here we're going to say, we're going to clear some information, and we're going to now show Pinky's name in the marquee. And then we're going to set Pinky at the correct Y position. So again, we're going to put it at 120. And then we're going to move the substate, and then we're going to do the same thing for Pinky. We're going to move Pinky to 56. They're all going to move, well, for the most part, we're going to move to 56, except here, Pinky is going to move a little under Blinky. So once it reaches 68, again, it's going to call this, and the process continues. So once those thresholds are met, then we substate it again, and so on and so forth. Then we introduce Inky, and then process Inky, and then we introduce and set up Sue, and we process Sue. And then the very last thing we do is we set up Miss Pac-Man to be introduced. Again, we're going to set Miss Pac-Man up with the same Y position, and we're going to go to the next one, and we're going to do the same thing for Miss Pac-Man. And then this time, though, we're only looking for the threshold to be moved over to the left till she gets to the 136th pixel. As you see, the Y coordinate is exact same because we're not moving Miss Pac-Man vertically. So, and then once that's met, then we get to our 10th state here, and this is what it will rest on. So once Miss Pac-Man, and once we get to this last substate, Miss Pac-Man freezes there. So her mouth, it stays open the entire time. So we just set her entity frame to 0 for that. So it always shows in that open mouth frame at that point for her sprite animation. And until the player actually presses the button, we will not actually move on to the 11th substate. So here we're just going to wait, and the thing's going to just show the marquee until the player actually presses the button 1 to start. So then once it press button 1 based off of our logic we have up here, we now load our option screen. So we're going to clear out the Miss Pac-Man stuff. We're going to load our options in, and then we're also going to load that additional Pac-Man text that we had over here. So we're going to load up this section, and we're going to load up this section. So that's what we're doing there. And maybe I glossed over that. The title options is actually that information that we have at the top is actually this. It's not the entire screen. It's just a section. Should be like a section like that, or that, one or the other, enough to overwrite the title stuff. So I'm just made a selection there, and then I said export tile IDs to decimal, and this will be written at 8.4. So maybe I'm at the right place here. See 8, no. So it would be here and here. So this is it, yeah, 8 and 4. So it would be this, and then however many across. And this section, this is what I copied, and then that's what's going to be drawn on the screen at coordinate tile X8 and tile Y4. So and that's what we're going to do. And we're going to do 18. It looks like I selected only 17, so it would be 18 across, according to this, and 11 down. So as you can see here, my selection that I have here, I have that we started at 8, just like this, and then the Y positions at 4, and we selected 18 columns across and 11 rows down, and then this is the actual graphic that we're going to use to paste into the title screen. So to be a little more clear about that. Then we're going to set the Miss Pac-Man sprite to look right, because when she came into the screen she was facing left, but when we show her as a cursor we want her to face right. So we're going to change that, and then we're going to change where the X position is. So now we're going to use Miss Pac-Man as a cursor here, so she'll be to the left of our options just a smidge, and that would be 56, and then we're going to move in to our next substate. So in this substate we're just polling, we're looking to see what keys have been pressed. We're going to see if the up key was pressed. We're going to check if it was down, or if it was right pressed, or if it was left pressed. So any of those directional values we're going to look for. So, and if it's the up key, what we're going to do is we're going to change our option index. Remember, that's those 4 values it can be, and we're going to subtract, because again, going up is subtracting. So we're going to check if we subtract 1 from the option index, the current one, say it's 0, and if we try and subtract that, will that be less than 0? If it is, then that's out of bounds. We can do 2 things here. We can stop them from pressing up, or we can loop it back to the bottom. So here we could have made it that if that would happen, then we would make it that the option index is 3, because remember 0, 1, 2, 3, that's 4 options. We can loop it to the bottom, and that would be nice too. But here I say nah, I just make it that you can't make that move. So if they try to press up and they're at the very top index, then it just resets back to 0. Otherwise we allow them to move up the index. So and that would be a scenario if the cursor was landed on something else other than the top option. So that's all we do here. We set that option index based off of that. If they press down, we do the same thing. We check, as you know, when we add things, we go down. So if we add 1 to our option index and it's greater than our maximum value, remember we have 0, 1, 2, 3. If it's greater than, then we're just going to keep it at the last option. We're not going to allow them to move down anymore. But if it's if they're at an option that's not the very last one, then we'll add it so that it shows up when they press the key inputs there. So just up and down, that's pretty simple. When it comes to the right, so when they press on the pad right, depending on what index they're on, as you can see, you have 0, 1, 2, or 3. So depending on what area they're at, it will do a different thing. So if it's at the very top, the first one, that's for our game mode. So it'd be 1 player, 2 player, or team mode. So what we're going to do is the same sort of thing that we did up here. We're going to see if adding 1 to the game mode is greater than our maximum value. So we only have 3 values, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, and 2. If it's greater than that, then we're just going to keep them at 2. Otherwise, it will allow them to increment it. And then once that game mode has been set, we're going to update the graphics on the screen to show that choice. Here, if the player, if it's on the pack boost option, if they're on 1 where the pack boost option, so again, this would be 0, this would be 1, this would be 2, and this would be 3. So 1 is the pack boost option. So if they press right, it turns it on. If you press left, it turns it off. So here, we give it a 1, so that turns it on. As you can see, well, if we press the left, it would make that pack boost option no. And here, it would make it yes. So we're going to say if they press right, it's going to turn it on, and then we're going to put in that text next to that option. We're going to put yes. If they press left there, then we're going to say no, that option's not on. So that's all we're doing there. If we go to the next index, again, this is all based off of pressing the key right first. That's the first condition. So if they press right on stage, we're going to do the same kind of logic. If we add 1 to stage, is it greater than our maximum amount of allowed stages, which is, since it starts at 0, 24. So if it's greater than 24, we're just going to keep it at 24. We're not going to allow them to go any further. If it's less than that, then we will add to the stage, and then again, we're going to update that selection on screen. We're going to draw that number. So remember, we have that array of all those number pairs. Well, we're going to use that here. So whatever number they pick for the stage, that's the number is going to show up. So since it starts at 0, the first number in the tile numbers array is 1. So even though 0 is the index, 1 will be the one that shows up here. So, and as you can see, it draws it here at 15 and 10, and then it will draw 2 characters horizontally and only 1 character high. So I made all those pairs. And 15 and 10, if we look at that in here, and we look at where 15 and 10 is, here we can select that. You can see that, or is it 15? Yeah. So you can see it's 10. That's actually 23. Okay. Should be 10. Oh, maybe I'm looking at the wrong value. I am. Well, okay. So yeah, 15 and 10. I'm not exactly sure why it keeps resetting. But anyway, while I hover over it, it says tile X 15 and then 10. But here for my selection, you can see it's also correct. So if I pick 2 of them there, you can see 15, 10. I pick 2 columns, 1 row, and that's where the numbers will be updated then. And that's what that means here. And then the last one is when they're on the lives. So if they press left and right, so here, when they press to the right, it will add more Miss Pac-Man icons. If they move left, it will reduce that number. So here we're going to do the same logic we did over here. We're going to see if we can add 1 to the default lives. If it's at our maximum threshold, which is 5, we're just going to keep it at 5. If it's still possible to add them, we're going to add another life. And that's all this does. And this chunk does the same thing as this chunk, except in an opposite value. Since we're not adding, now we're subtracting and then going left with it. Again, going left is negativing or subtracting. Going right is addition. So we're doing that here. It's just the same logic. We're just applying it in a subtractive way. As you can see, we subtract. Here, we went over that already. Pack boost, if we press left, is turning it off. And then this would be reducing the stage that we want, and we're making sure that we don't go below 0 and that sort of thing. So, and then when they make that selection, the last check we're looking for in this, because remember we're in the option mode now with the substate, so we're in 12. So we're looking for all our direction keys, but then we are also looking for if the button 1 has been pressed. So when that happens, we make another confirmation sound, and then we move on to the next substate. And here you can see, I'm sorry, I didn't put this, or this is outside of the entire logic here. It will just set the sprite position for Miss Pac-Man, the vertical one, based off of whatever our option is, and then within the option index, if we go back to that option 1, which was at the top of the screen, it'll be one of these 4 values that coincide with the options. So depending on what the option is, so if it's 0, then it's at 36, and if it's at option 1, then it'll move down to 60, and so on and so forth. So that's what it's doing there. But after the button has been pressed, we're going to play a confirmation sound. We're going to move the substate, and then we're in this last substate. And we're going to wait until this sound gets done playing, because it has to wait. If we did it immediately, it will cut off the sound. So we want the sound to play all the way through before we do all the setup. So now that we figured out all our options, we're going to take our game state and we're going to move it over to our next game state, which is the actual stage. So that's what gets set here. And then we're going to set player 1 and player 2 stage to the selected stage that was made here through our options. So whatever that is. And then we're going to reset the current stage to 0. That will get set later when we load up the actual stage from this game. And then we're going to also set our default lives based off of those selections. And here at the very end, typically how the behavior is for this game, if you play a game and then it's game over and you come back to the title screen, it will still show you the last scores that were played on player 1 and player 2. And that copies the behavior of the original game. So after the game is over and you come back to the title screen, it will just populate at the very top what the last scores were. But once you press the button to start a new game, we're going to reset those player 1 and player 2 scores. The high score stays, of course. So that's all it does. And this is the very last thing that we have to do until we get into it. Like again, we're going to start playing the game. And when we change the state, the stage, as you recall, the previous stage will now be different because the previous game state will be the title game state. And when we change the current game state to stage, it will now be different. So in the next loop, we're going to use whatever our current game state is. So we set it to stage, but since we didn't set the previous game state's still this one. And then when we set it the current one to stage, these don't match anymore on the next game loop. And then what I'll do is I'll start our loading of the stage, and then at the end of this, it will make the previous game state and the current game state equal to one another. So in the next loop, then we actually start running the game at that point. So, and that's all we're doing here. And what we're going to do is, I'm going to title, I'm going to save it. I'm going to try and run it. See if it runs, hopefully. Okay. It did not work the way that I anticipated it to. So let's go to game. Oh, I never changed this. I went right to stage. It's supposed to be title. That was my bad. So let's try that again. And hopefully this time does what I want it to. Okay, and there we go. As you can see, these 6 points are updating. They're falling around the marquee and counterclockwise motion as we discussed. We have this portion of the first stage 1 map, and we plop that in there over top of our original design. Here we have NTSC, and we have Ms. Pac-Man that came in from the left, and you can see all these ghosts have different Y values that they have to meet before they move on to the next substate. So now all I have to do is press the button according to the logic. So there we go. Now we're here in our options screen, and if I press down, it moves the cursor. Won't allow me to go any further. Pressing down doesn't do anything. If I go up, it won't allow me to go any further pressing up. So, and then if we press right, we can change our option for the team mode, so, or the game mode. So if I press over to the right, it allows me to only go to team play. If I press to the left, it only allows me to get down to the one player. Same thing here. If I press to the right, it allows the boost. If I press to the left, no. If I go down here and I keep pressing, it will update to whatever stage I want to, all the way up to stage 25, which is the maximum amount. When I press left, it will de-increment down to 1, and then here, if I press left and right here, it will allow me to get more lives. So there we go. And if I just press the button at this point, and then it should start the game. So here we go, we're starting up the game. I have pack boost on this time, so I'm fast boy. So, and this is normally how I play this game. Become spoiled. But yeah, and that's really all there is to it. And we can also check if our problem with the score that we had before, if that was fixed, and I want to do that in the original mode that we had, so the not fast mode. So and I'll go through here real quick. Alright, so I'm going to reset, and we're going to check if that high score bug is fixed. Again, I could press A at any point, so we can move on, and I'm just going to use what we have currently. And again, I'm going to see if that score up top has been fixed so that it shows properly. So again, it should be yes. Now it doesn't show zeros before I get up to it, so that was the problem, and that has been fixed as well. So there you go. And I believe that's everything. Again, if you want to delve in deeper with the other game states that I did go over, you feel free to. It's in the repository that I have in the description. I have it in all the videos, I believe. So, and this really concludes the entirety of this tutorial, and I hope to some extent, to at least a little bit, that it helped you understand how to write a game in C and using Devkit SMS, which is a very powerful tool. The individual who wrote it, and I know I'm gonna bork this name, but Sferx, I believe you pronounce it. These X names, right? They are completely passionate about this library, and I absolutely love it. It is a very great library. I definitely recommend it if you're apprehensive about getting your feet wet with writing raw assembly for the Z80, and you might want to try this, because again, C is a more kind of approachable language when you're writing code. Then I would say than assembly. That may be true, that may be not true, but however you want to look at it. Some people, they get an assembly and they take to it right away. Some people, they prefer to write with something like C. So it's whatever your preference is, but the options out here, and the greatest, one of the greatest things about this library is that it has so many things that you can use to create a game up front. It is the equivalent, I think. The Genesis has an SDK of their own, and I believe this is the Sega Master System equivalent of that Genesis SDK, which I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. It's probably something simple, but I can't remember. I see it being used all over the place nowadays for the Genesis dev, but this is basically the equivalent of that. You can get a game rapidly put together with it. It doesn't require a whole heck of a lot of crazy know-how for it. So again, it shields you from a lot of things, and it makes a lot of other things very convenient for you. So as long as you watch yourself when it comes to processing and not, try to do things as optimized as you can, the Sega Master System is definitely a hard thing to write for, because the resources are very limited and the processing power is very limited, and you just kind of have to get in your head that you're going to have to do certain things to optimize your logic as you're creating your game. So again, I can't praise this framework or this SDK, or however you want to look at it, enough. It is a fantastic piece of software, and again, the person behind is very passionate, very knowledgeable. And you can make requests on smspower.org if there's something there that within the library that you don't see, or that you would like to have. They're very responsive to it, and they make changes, all the time to accommodate. So yeah, that's all I got at this point. So again, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you around.